Bhat Paramahamsa Parivrajikacharya Ashtatara Satashi Srimad Divine Grace Abhay Chanaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Gopinath Bhagavan Ki Jai Granth Raj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Jai Nitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto number 3, Chapter 22. The marriage of Kardama Muni and Devahuti, text number 20. Yato bhavad vishvamidam vichitram samstasyate yatra cha vavatistete Prajapatinam patir esha mahyam param pamanam bhagavan ananta yato bhavad vishvamidam vichitram samstasyate yatra cha vavatishtate Prajapatinam patiresha mahyam param pramanam bhagavan anantaha yato bhavad vishvamidam vichitram samstasyate yatra cha vavatishtate Prajapatinam patiresha mayam param pramanam bhagavan anantaha yato bhavad vishvamidam vichitram samstasyate yatra cha vavastishtate Prajapatinam patiresha mahyam param pramanam bhagavan anantaha yato bhavad vishvamidam vichitram samstasyate yatra cha vavatishtate Prajapatinam patiresha mahyam param paranam bhagavan anantaha. Word for word. Yataha, from whom abhavat emanated, Vishvam, creation, idam, this, vichitram, wonderful, samstasyate, will dissolve, yatra, in whom, cha, and, va, or, vatishtate, presently exists, prajapatinam, of the Prajapatis, patihi, the Lord, esha, this, mahyam, to me, param, highest, pramanam, authority, bhagavan, supreme Lord, anantaha, unlimited. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Abhay Chanaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Jagadguru Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation: the highest authority for me is the unlimited supreme personality of Godhead, from whom this wonderful creation emanates, and in whom in whom its sustenance and dissolution rest. He is the origin of all Prajapatis, the personalities meant to produce living entities in this world. Purport: Kardama Muni was ordered by his father Prajapati to produce children. In the beginning of creation, the Prajapatis were meant to produce the large population which was to reside in the planets of the gigantic universe. But Kardama Muni said that although his father was Prajapati, who desired him to produce children, actually his origin was the Supreme Personality of Godhead Vishnu, because Vishnu is the origin of everything. He is the actual creator of this universe. He is the actual maintainer, and when everything is annihilated, it rests in him only. That is the conclusion of Srimad Bhagavatam. For creation, maintenance and annihilation, there are three deities, Brahma, Vishnu and Maheshwara, Shiva. But Brahma and Maheshwara are qualitative expansions of Vishnu. Vishnu is the central figure. Vishnu therefore takes charge of maintenance. No one can maintain the whole creation but he. There are innumerable entities and they have innumerable demands, but no one but Vishnu can fulfill the innumerable demands of all the innumerable living entities. Brahma is ordered to create and Shiva is ordered to annihilate. The middle function, maintenance, is taken charge of by Vishnu. Kardama Muni knew very well by his power in progressive spiritual life that Vishnu, the personality of Godhead, was his worshipable deity. Whatever Vishnu desired was his duty and nothing else. He was not prepared to beget a number of children. He would beget only one child who would help him or who would help the mission of Vishnu. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, whenever there is discrepancy in the discharge of religious principles, the Lord descends on the surface of the earth to protect religious principles and to annihilate the miscreants. Marrying and begetting a child is considered to liquidate one's debts to the family in which one is born. There are many debts which are imposed upon a child just after his birth. There are debts to the family in which one is born, debts to the demigod, debts to the pitas, debts to the rishis, etc. But if someone engages only in the service of the Supreme Lord, the personality of Godhead, who is actually worshipable, then even without trying to liquidate other debts, one becomes free from all obligations. Kardama Muni preferred to devote his life as a servant of the Lord in Paramahamsa knowledge, and to beget a child only for that purpose, not to beget numberless children to fill up the vacancies in the universe. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Mukham karoti vachalam bhangam langayate girim yat kripatamaham vande Shri Gurun Devam Dharanam Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanya. Hare Krishna. So thank you for attending today's Srimad Bhagavatam class. We're continuing with Kardama Muni's conversation with Swayambhuv Manu and how Kardama Muni is accepting the hand of Devahuti from Swayambhuv Manu, her father. So we heard from Radha Vinod Prabhu yesterday a bit about the previous text, how Kardama Muni, although appeared to be very ecstatic and materially so-called happy that Lord Vishnu had satisfied his desires, Kardama Muni in text 19 very clearly states, and in text 20 states or expresses his deep innermost thoughts, his desires and his consciousness, that actually everything he is doing is simply for the benefit of Lord Vishnu. And we see that previously when he met the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself, that he was very straightforward and honest. He wasn't duplicitous. He prayed to the Lord specifically for what he should be asking, and he asked, and taking the stance of a mere sadhaka or a conditioned soul, he prayed in such a way that it showed that he was on a lower platform of service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But actually the standard of Kardama Muni is so great that the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself appeared to him during his tapasya, and the Supreme Personality of Godhead appeared to him as his son. The Supreme Personality of Godhead appeared and gave him instructions through his father Prajapati Brahma, and he also appeared and gave him direct instructions. He arranged everything in Kardama Muni's life, if you think about it. From the beginning to the end, the Supreme Personality of Godhead personally chose or personally arranged Kardama Muni's life so that he will come back to him. So Kardama Muni is not some ordinary living entity. And as we continue to read, as we've read so far, and as we continue to read this section of Srimad Bhagavatam, we shouldn't get confused or get bewildered by seeing the activities of Kardama Muni. Because externally it would seem that Kardama Muni is just another sense gratifier. Especially in the coming chapters where he arranges great facilities of enjoyment so that he can enjoy the Grihastha ashram with his wife Devahuti. But it is very easy for us to fall into the trap that to see that Kardama Muni enjoyed nicely. You see, the Supreme Personality Godhead is not so cheap. We read in Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita that Mahaprabhu explains to, I believe it's Sanatana Goswami, that Krishna himself says that he's not so cheap. That if someone comes to him asking for material benedictions, that Krishna says that I am not so foolish as to satisfy his desires. In fact, I will give him the taste of my devotional service, the dust of my lotus feet, to the extent that he'll forget his material desires. In other words, Krishna will satisfy your desires in such a way that you'll never want it again. So, Sri Radha Gopinath are not so cheap that they'll give material benedictions, because the demigods are already doing that anyway. It becomes like what Prahlad Maharaj says is a business or a merchant relationship. When Prahlad Maharaj was sitting on the lap of Nrsingadev, and after offering the prayers, Nrsingadev asked him, if you have any benediction, I can fulfill it. Please ask me. And Prahlad Maharaj said that I don't have anything. And he was coaxed by Nrsingadev to ask for something. So then he asked for what? The liberation of his father. Nothing for himself, simply thinking about his father. But then after that, Nrsingadev coaxed him again. That okay, that's already been done, you're a pure devotee. Many generations past, present and future are already liberated by your presence in such a family tree. So you ask for something more. That's already been granted. So then he tells Nrsingadev that actually I don't want anything from you. I don't want this relationship to be like that of a merchant, that we simply engage in some business, that you do something for me, I do something for you. Just like a servant ceases the service after being paid, I don't want such a relationship like that. In fact, what do I want? I want yadi dasyasi me kaman varamstam varadashyabha kamanam hridaya samroham bhavatastu vrinevaram. That, my dear Lord, O best of the givers of benediction, I don't want any desires. But if at all you want to bestow a desire upon me, I desire that there be no trace of material desire within my heart. If you at all want to bestow a benediction on me, that there be no trace of material desire within the heart. In other words, Prahlad Maharaj is showing the standard of devotional service. Anya abhilashita sunyam jnana karmadi anavritam anukulyena krishna anushilnam bhaktir uttamam. Sorry, I lost track. So Prahlad Maharaj is showing that pure devotional service is the standard. And Kardama Muni is showing that here as well. Because it appears that, Kardama Muni's, got all his benedictions granted. He wants a good wife, he wants a respectable wife, he wants one that will protect him in his sadhana, he wants to live peacefully so that he can also beget a child. By begetting a child, he'll be able to follow the instructions of his spiritual master. He's in such a wonderful place. If you think about it, he's living in something like a spiritual or a material resort. If you read the descriptions, he's living in some sort of like vacation holiday spot. Right? Everyone is seeking such a exotic location to be able to relax after suffering in material existence. Everyone wants to build a nice house in such a place so they can enjoy for the rest of their life. And it seems Kardama Muni has all of that facility. But what is Kardama Muni saying? Yesterday's verse, he's saying that he will just simply beget a child, and after begetting a child, he'll just simply take up the Paramahamsa Mukhyan, the Dharma of the Paramahamsas, the topmost renunciates. That is, that he will just take to sannyas. He'll simply leave Grihastha Ashrama. And in this verse, why is he saying that? Because in the previous verse, in 19, he's saying, that is a process, that process was described by Lord Vishnu, it is free from envy. And so now he's saying in text 20, because one may think that, what about what Brahma said? What about Prajapati, his father Brahma? Another name of Brahma is Prajapati. What about Prajapati? He said to beget children, right? The whole purpose of Kardama Muni's coming into existence, so to speak, by Lord Brahma's desire, is that he should propagate the whole universe full of children, so that Brahma can fulfill his mission of creating the material existence as Lord Vishnu wanted it. But then Kardama Muni specifically pointing out that actually the highest authority for me is Lord Vishnu. Yes, I'm required to procreate, I'm required to procreate the whole universe, but I'm following the instructions of the Lord. And what is the Lord asking him to do? The Lord is asking him to engage in the service of Lord Brahma in procreating, but not so much so to become lost in the service. As you can see, a good example of this is Daksha. It's mentioned he's got the name Daksha because he's so expert in procreating. But just see the result of his expertise. Although he's following in the instructions of his father, Lord Brahma, Daksha Prajapati ended up offending out of pride Lord Shiva, to the extent that he got a goat's head. And in the next life, when he took birth as the son of the Prachetas, again he makes the same mistake, offending Narada Muni, thinking himself so expert in procreating. So you can see that there is this instruction given by the father, Prajapati, Brahma, but ultimately there is the instruction given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So when you take it from the perspective of how one is taken birth into material existence by the mercy of the parents, mother and father, Prabhupada says that this is an amazing way of thinking about it. Because if you think about it, from a material standard, we think birth is such a joyful experience, right? Birth, creation of life, it's such a wonderful event, right? But when we read from Srimad Bhagavatam, how much pain there is in both parties, both mother, father, child, how much pain they go through. But still, Maya, material existence, they advertise such a difficult situation as a wonderful affair, right? Nowadays you see the advertising industry, they'll just simply say wonderful words to describe the product. Although product may be such a useless thing, they'll describe it as such wonderful ways. Like it's just soap, for example. But if you read the back of all the soap packets, they'll talk about so many things like heavenly wonderful, heavenly luxury, feel like melting into this and that. So they describe or they gloss over what it actually is. It's just simply soap, right? But by such words of description, one is put into illusion that one is enjoying a wonderful experience by putting soap on the body. In the same way, birth is being romanticized. But actually what is there? There are many debts there are many debts which are imposed upon a child after his birth. Right? It's like, for example, you walk into the room and suddenly, someone comes up to you and says that now you have a $2 million debt. You just came into the temple and someone just tells you, no, you now have $2 million debt. Right? But if you think about it, it's such a horrible thing. You take birth and suddenly you have to take all these debts upon your head. But if one takes to the shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then one is able to overcome all of these debts. Devashi Bhutapta Nirnam Pratirnam. Nard Muni is explaining that, no, I think this is Lord Krishna. Yes, it's Lord Krishna. Krishna is mentioning to the sages in Kurukshetra that when one takes to the shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, all the debts, namely from the debts from the family, debts to the demigods, debts to the forefathers, debts to the rishis, debts to the human beings, all of these things become wiped out, nullified. Your credit record becomes completely clean, right? You no longer have a credit history, so to speak. And so then what happens? You simply engage in the Supreme Personality of Godhead's worship. And by worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead, you liquidate all debts and you become free from all types of obligations. So, in this purport, just quickly before I go to the main topic or main theme of what I wanted to speak on today, was that Prabhupada is emphasizing this point of how Lord Vishnu is the origin. Janmadi yasya yataha. Srimad Bhagavatam concludes, or the conclusion or the central point of Srimad Bhagavatam, Prabhupada says, is that he is the actual maintainer, Krishna, and when everything is annihilated, everything rests in him only. That is the conclusion of Srimad Bhagavatam. Janmadi yasya yataha. That from him everything emanates, he maintains it, everything in him, everything rests. So that's, you see that in Krishna's pastime, when Mother Yashoda opened up Gopal, Bal Gopal's mouth, to see whether he had eaten dirt. In another instance, she wanted to see his teeth after breastfeeding him. She wanted to see. And in both instances, she saw what? She saw the whole universe within his mouth, within his belly. So everything rests within Lord Krishna. Everything comes from him, and he maintains everything. Prabhupada says here that no one is able to satisfy the innumerable desires of everyone else except for Lord Vishnu. And what is the verse given? That's I can't remember. The one, he's the Nitya Nityanam Chetanas Chetananam. So there Prabhupada mentions, this is from Svetasvatara Upanishad, that actually he is the chief. Nitya Nityanam Chetanas Chetananam. That he is the chief Nitya of the many Nitya. And he is the supreme personality amongst the many personalities. And it is he who maintains all living entities. Prabhupada gives the example, the ant gets a grain of sugar and the elephant gets tons of rice or tons of hay. Everything is being maintained by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So although he delegates to Lord Brahma and to Lord Shiva the creation and annihilation, he doesn't give them the maintenance function because only he can do that. But when you see Lord Brahma is struggling or endeavoring so hard, not struggling but endeavoring so hard to be able to create, Lord Shiva endeavors so hard to destroy or annihilate. But you see Lord Vishnu, what is he doing? He's simply lying down and enjoying. Although he needs to maintain all living entities, by his energies everything is being done and he's simply the enjoyer. He doesn't need to struggle whatsoever. So you can see that the position of Vishnu, that what his instructions are completely surpasses all of the lower instructions. Jati karma, jata karma, or one's ashrama dharma, any lower dharmas to do with the body, to do with one's position in the varnashrama system, becomes immediately minimized in the instruction, in front of the instruction of pure devotional service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So here Kadava Muni is mentioning this main point, that although his father ordered him to produce children, Lord Vishnu wanted him to produce a child, but for what purpose? Kadava Muni preferred to devote his life as a servant of the Lord in Paramahamsa knowledge and to beget a child only for that purpose. Not to beget numberless children to fill up the vacancies in the universe. So his purpose was simply to help his father, of course, but following in the footsteps or following the instructions of Lord Vishnu. So sometimes we should become clear in our devotional service. Like Arjuna in the beginning of Bhagavad Gita, he completely lost track. What should I do? Should I fight or should I not fight? On the other side are family members. On this side are family members. If they all die, for what reason am I fighting? Just for the sake of enjoyment, see what abominable activities I'm doing. So Arjuna became confused because of these lower dharmas or lower occupational duties. But what was the ultimate thing that he had to do? He had to simply follow the instructions of Lord Krishna. That's why he comes to the point of, whatever you say, O Keshava or Achyuta, that I will do. So this is the point or the main thing I wanted to speak about in the purport. Another point or another theme that I'd like to touch upon is this point of shelter. The more we are surrendered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the more sheltered we are. Ye yatha mam prapadyate tham statevya bhajamyaham mama vartmanu vartante manusya partha sarvashaha. Everyone to some degree is sheltered or surrendered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It may be directly to his lotus feet, it may be to his internal energy, or through his internal energy rather, he's surrendered to the lotus feet of the Lord, or through the external energy. Everyone is following his path. That we should not forget. So, taking shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is a very important aspect of our devotional service. Why? Because by taking shelter, by understanding that we are Jivera Sarupa Hoy Nityara Krishna Das or Krishnera Nitya Das, we are a servant of Krishna by nature. That is our eternal occupational duty, to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So what does that mean to serve? It means to be ready to do whatever Krishna likes, whenever Krishna likes. And that means we must be ready to take shelter in whatever Krishna says. Shelter in Krishna. Whatever Gopinath wants us to do, we should be ready to do it. So in that connection, we can see in the life of Gorakishore Das Babaji Maharaj. I believe today is the appearance day of Gorakishore. Yeah, it's the disappearance day of Srila Gorakishore Das Babaji Maharaj. And it's mentioned that Gorakishore Das Babaji Maharaj exemplified renunciation. Shakshad Vairagya Murtaye, it's mentioned. His pranam mantra is Namo Gorakishoraya Shakshad Vairagya Murtaye Vipralamba Rasambodhe Padam Bhujayate Namaha. I offer my respectful obeisances unto Gorakishore Das Babaji Maharaj, the spiritual master of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, who is renunciation personified. He is always merged in a feeling of separation and intense love of Krishna. Some biographies mention Gorakishore Das Babaji Maharaj before he took Babaji Vesh. His name was Vamsi Das, and that he was a farmer, a Vaishya by ashrama. Then again, it's mentioned that he was a Mahabhagavat, so we see this as him setting a standard or exam, setting the footsteps or setting the path for which all sadhakas can follow. It's mentioned at a certain stage that one biography says that his wife passed away. Another biography said he developed a great sense of renunciation and he went to Vrindavan. There he met a disciple of Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj known as Bhagavat Das Babaji. And he took Diksha from him and took shelter of him. And it's mentioned that he stayed in Vrindavan for 30 years. And in those 30 years, he was completely absorbed in serving Shishi Radha Gopinath. His complete absorption included, his activities included simply sitting down and chanting. It's mentioned he chanted 128 rounds a day. Something like 2 lakh rounds a day. And it's mentioned that he would go from one place to another doing madhukari, accepting whatever he could get and eating that. And usually it would be old grains of rice which he would soak and take. Some places mentioned that he would go to the burning ghats where the bodies were being cremated, and he would take the cloth there, wash it and wear it and use it as his garments. these are some of the examples of Gaurkishore Das Babaji Maharaj's renunciation, I guess from an external point of view. But internally he was completely renounced to this extent that he was always absorbed in the pastimes of Radha and Krishna. To the extent that he would see every living entity in the Dham as the servants of the divine couple, and he would always engage in offering obeisances to them. It's mentioned that the primary characteristic or vision of a Brahmana is that they're able to see them as everyone as part and parcel of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Pandita Samadharshina. It's one of the primary qualities of a Brahmana. Brahmabhuta prasannatma na sochiti na kankshiti. Sama sarveshu bhuteshu. To see the Supreme Lord in every living entity. It's a primary qualification of a Brahmana of a high caliber. And a Vaishnava has that to the greater degree. They see the Supreme Lord, they see the living entity as the servant of the Lord, and they engage in their service. So this aspect of shelter, renunciation, it's a very intertwined aspect of devotional service. Because if you have a look from going from Shraddha to Prema, you have Shraddha, you have Shraddha, you have Sadhu Sangha, then you have Bhajana Kriya, Anartha Nivritti, then you have Anartha Nivritti, Nishtha, Ruchi, Asakti, Prema, Bhava Prema. This idea of Ashaktis, Ashakti doesn't necessarily mean giving up attachment to material world. Actually, the reference of Ashakti means intense attachment to Krishna. When one is attached intensely in Krishna's service, one is naturally detached from material existence. So this idea of renunciation separate from Krishna is Falgu Vairagya. In other words, when you take an object to be something separate from Krishna, and the mentality is kind of like, this mic is Maya. We shouldn't use it. We should just immediately throw it. Right? Or for example, Radha Vinod Prabhu was giving the example yesterday that someone had come to Tamal Krishna Maharaj and said, "Oh, my Guru Maharaj ji, he's such a elevated personality that when someone came to offer him money, he said, no, I cannot accept this. This is Maya." And Tamal Krishna Maharaj said, "My spiritual master is so great that although someone came to him with money, he said, immediately give it to me, I'll engage in Krishna service. Give me more." So the real renunciation is to use everything in Krishna's service, because then you realize or understand that everything belongs to Krishna. That is real renunciation. So Gaurkishore Das Babaji Maharaj, his mood was simply in engaging in the service of the divine couple. After 30 years, it's mentioned that he had decided to go to Navadvip Dham after getting the blessings of the devotees and after getting intimation from the Shri Radha Krishna. He decided to stay in Navadvip Dham. And there it's mentioned that he stayed for the rest of his life, and he took shiksha from Bhaktivinoda Thakur there. That Bhaktivinoda Thakur would speak Srimad Bhagavatam. But here's the wonderful thing. Bhaktivinoda Thakur's mood was that I will speak Bhagavatam to please and to serve Gaurkishore Das Babaji Maharaj. Because Gaurkishore Das Babaji Maharaj would prefer to be separated or prefer to be perform his bhajan alone. Why is that? Alone means that he would often be disturbed by many materialists. Many people would come to him and tell him that, "Babaji Maharaj, please kindly give me your shelter, please kindly give me your instructions." And Babaji Maharaj would often stay in the bathroom, the latrine it's mentioned, and he would lock himself in there to avoid such materialists. And his mood was that it would be better to sit with such filthy substances than to associate with materialists, because that is even more disgusting. So you can see his mood. Another time someone came to Gaurkishore Das Babaji Maharaj and asked him that, "Please give me your blessings." He was a wealthy merchant, and he asked, and so Gaurkishore Das Babaji Maharaj gave him the blessings that Sarvanash hoibe, that everything will become destroyed. Why? Because his mood was that this materialism is completely intoxicating. A small contamination of this desire to enjoy will destroy one's devotional service completely. So Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj was very, very, very strict in that matter. It's mentioned that one particular Babaji in the area, he had accepted some festival prasadam and he was eating that in his bhajan kutir. And although Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj used to associate with him, for 3 days he neglected him, this particular Babaji. So then on the 4th day, Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj went and approached this Babaji who had taken the festival prasadam. And he chastised him. Just see, you've taken this so-called festival prasadam that was prepared by materialists. Now all of your devotional service has gone to waste. All of your austerities and penances have become destroyed. So Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj was very, very, very strict, very, very particular, very, very careful in protecting his devotional service. Because he had taken shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and he saw the value. He saw how valuable Krishna is. Like I said in the beginning, Krishna is not so cheap. Service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead is not so cheap. Krishna mentions in Bhagavad Gita that Manusyanam Sahasreshu Kaschit Yatati Siddhaye Yatatam Api Siddhanam Kaschit Mam Veti Tatvataha. Manusyanam Sahasreshu takes so many births for such a jnani to come to a knowledge of that Krishna is the Supreme. So Krishna's devotional service, Krishna himself, they are not cheap. And Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj's devotional service was so strict, so rigid, that he showed to the whole world how one must protect one's devotional service, how one must take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and take shelter of the process of devotional service and protect one's devotional service. Protect one's bhakti lata, the devotional creeper in the heart. He did not accept any disciples save and except for Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And it's mentioned that he would roam around Navadvip with 2 books. Although he was an illiterate, he was of the highest platform of Paramahamsa. And someone like Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, the greatest scholar of his time, took shelter of Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj. So you can understand another point here, that it's not mature qualifications, it's not one's scholarship, one's ability to speak such articulate, verbose way, in a verbose way. Rather, it's one's mood, one's consciousness, one's devotion to the Supreme Lord, which dictates how pure one's devotional service is, and one's standard of devotional service, and what standard of devotee one is. So, Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj would go around with Prema Bhakti Chandrika and Pratana, both by Narottam Das Thakur, and would be absorbed in hearing that. It's mentioned that Narottam Das Thakur had given, prior to him, the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition did not have something simple. Everything was in Sanskrit. Everything was written down. The science of bhakti was given in such a way that it was mainly or primarily in Sanskrit. But Narottam Das Thakur wanted it easily accessible to all common men. So he wrote it down in very simple Bengali and he sung it. He gave it in the form of kirtan, bhajan, so that any common person would remember it, sing it, and be able to become the highest devotee. Because just by reading these Vaishnava bhajans, one will understand the import, the purport or the conclusion of the Vedas. So Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj was the highest or the topmost Paramahamsa. This Paramahamsa Mukhyam that we read of in text 19, the path or the duties of the Paramahamsa is being glorified by Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj because of his strict performance of devotional service. Now one may think, how can Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj be so ruthless to everyone, to all people coming? Once one king came to Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj and asked him that, please give me your association, just give up living here and come to my palace, you can live with me. And Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj said, actually you should just simply give up your palace. You give up your palace, you give up your royal position, you give up all of that, you come and live in this dham, in a straw hut, and there we can engage in the ecstasies of devotional service to Lord Krishna. In another place, Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj had told his servant that today is a great festival. It was a festival, I've forgotten what particular instance it was, but it was a situation or a one second, I think I can find it for you. It was the disappearance day of Srila Sanatana Goswami. So then, Gaur Das Babaji Maharaj, he said that we will have a great festival this afternoon, a Mahotsava, because it was glorifying the passing away of Sanatana Goswami. And his servant at the time asked him, but Babaji Maharaj, you don't have anything. You don't have any food, nothing. What are you talking about festival? You're going to serve great feast, great festival, but you don't have anything to serve. Then Babaji Maharaj explained there's no need of anything. We may fast and chant the holy name of Krishna, and in this humble way we shall enjoy a great festival. So you can see he had the basics. He had the basics down. He understood the very basic things that need to be performed in devotional service. Right? We get sometimes carried away with this and that. Prabhupada says, actually all you need to do is chant. But because you can't do that, I have to tax my brain so much to give you some way to be engaged in devotional service. Ultimately, our goal is to be absorbed in hearing and chanting about Krishna. Kardama Muni is showing this. Gaurkishore Das Babaji Maharaj is showing this. Because in the next verse in Bhagavatam, Kardama Muni, it's mentioned that Kardama Muni just stopped. That's all he said. And he became silent and just meditated on Lord Vishnu. That's it. And Prabhupada says in the purport tomorrow, without giving too much away, that pure devotees are absorbed in thought of Krishna, that they have no other engagement. Although they may seem to think or act otherwise, they are thinking always of Krishna. Prabhupada, he began this Krishna consciousness movement with nothing. And Prabhupada, he at the end had everything by Krishna's mercy, by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mercy. But Prabhupada's mood was simple. Prabhupada's desires, Prabhupada's motive, Prabhupada's purpose was the same. To simply carry out the instructions of his spiritual master, nothing else. That's it. So you can understand that devotional service is actually quite easy. It's a very simple process, but we complicate it because of our attachment to material existence, our lack of shelter in Krishna. Our lack of shelter is what's causing us distress, not the other way around. That, I'm chanting 16 rounds, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, how come I'm still suffering? You're still suffering because we're still attached to material existence. That's why we're still suffering. If you take full shelter of Lord Krishna, if you take shelter in Gopinath's service, naturally you will overcome such suffering. Like for example, sitting in Srimad Bhagavatam class. By sitting in Srimad Bhagavatam class, you get the opportunity to simply absorb yourself in hearing about Gopinath's glories. And by doing that, you're able to overcome even something as very difficult as hunger, simply by hearing about Gopinath's pastimes. So you can see this mood of renunciation, and you can see this mood of complete absorption in Krishna. Complete absorption in Krishna. Nothing more, nothing less. So then, today also marks the beginning of Bhishma Panchak. And Lord Bhishma Dev himself, being one of the Mahajans, he's setting the example in which to perform devotional service. So you can see that sense of renunciation, or rather that sense of renunciation, but that sense of taking shelter. It's not false renunciation, like I was mentioning before, Falgu Vairagya, that, like monkey renunciation, right? You appear to be renounced, but internally you're still attached. Not that type of renunciation. That's dry. That's not what we want in devotional service. We use everything in Krishna's service. That is proper Yukta Vairagya. But to perform Yukta Vairagya, we first need to know what is renunciation, what we need to give up, what we shouldn't give up. That's given by the guidance of the spiritual master. So that we should not forget. But anyway, Yukta Vairagya is a very easy thing to perform for one in pure devotional service. Without proper guidance, one may fall into the trap of saying that, I will earn so much money to be able to engage in Krishna's service, but then neglect one's spiritual life, for example. Or in another instance like Bharat Maharaj, without proper guidance, he got absorbed in a deer and his spiritual life went down the drain. So we need proper guidance there. So Bhishma Dev here is also showing this essence of devotional service, that one should just simply be absorbed in hearing and chanting the glories of Lord Krishna. And there, in this verse, Bhishma Dev is mentioning, this is the passing away of Bhishma Dev in the presence of Lord Krishna. Canto 1, Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 9, Text 32. Bhishma Dev said, "Let me now invest my thinking, feeling and willing, which were so long engaged in different subjects and occupational duties, in the all-powerful Lord Sri Krishna. He is always self-satisfied, but sometimes being the leader of devotees, he enjoys transcendental pleasure by descending to the material world, although from him only the world is created." So here Bhishma Dev is mentioning what he should be doing, what all living entities should be doing. Investing our thinking, feeling and willing in the all-powerful Lord Krishna. Investing our thinking, feeling and willing in Krishna. And that in essence is the purpose of Ekadasi Vrat, the purpose of Damodar Vrat, or the Urja Vrat in Damodar Mas, and in essence Bhishma Panchak, to be absorbed in hearing and chanting about Lord Krishna. One may do it in so many ways through different vows, but the essence is not that, just see, one month I went without food, or 1 month I went without sugar, or 1 month I went out with this, or 5 days I lived my life without that. Yes, okay, that's a good offering to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But with the spare time that you have now, invest that in Krishna's service. Invest that in hearing and chanting more about Lord Krishna. That is the main purpose of us performing austerities and penances, to reduce our bodily needs to the bare minimum so that we can engage this short, valuable time of human form of life in engaging in the service of the Lord. And Bhishma Dev is showing this by example. Gaur Kishodas Babaji Maharaj is showing this by example, and Kardama Muni is showing this by example. So, this taking shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is not a cheap thing, it's not an easy thing to do. But it is possible in the association of devotees. It is possible by the mercy of the spiritual master. So by engaging in devotional service and with proper guidance, we can understand how to engage in the Lord's service and engage our senses, engage all objects in the Lord's service. And by taking shelter of the Lord, we'll become peaceful and happy in devotional service, as exemplified by these great personalities. So I'll end here. Is there any questions or comments? Anything anyone wants to add? Questions? Okay. No. Thank you very much for listening. Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Shri Radha Gopinath Bhagavan ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Nithai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bo.